Hello, I'm Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research for Vistage, and happy to host this latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. The series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community, those experts who provide exceptional insight and best practices to help you navigate new challenges and possibilities. With changing costs from tariffs, forecasted inflation, and rising wages, many Vistage companies are planning to increase prices. In fact, the Vistage CEO Confidence Index that closed on Monday revealed that 49% of CEOs plan to increase prices in the next 3 months alone. As Taylor St. Germain from ITR Economics said to Vistage CEOs in Houston last month, you will not be able to protect your margins based on price increases alone. Productivity is going to be a critical part of that equation. To that end, we've invited Derrick Mains from the Process Fixer to discuss how to gain certainty by optimizing the things that you can control. Derrick Mains is a 2022 Emmy Award-winning content creator and a seasoned operations consultant with over 20 years experience driving operational excellence across more than 300 companies. His expertise lies in optimizing operations, improving throughput, and expanding margins, making him a sought-after advisor to businesses aiming to elevate their performance. Welcome, Derrick. Over to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today. You should all be able to see my slides. We are going to be talking about certainty and the challenges that we have in the marketplace right now with a lot of uncertainty happening. And the best way to predict the future is to be the designer of it. And that's what we'll be talking about today. I always like to show the Vistage decision model because I think it's a great framework to help you understand what I'm going to be talking about today and how it applies to you. For the most part, I'm going to be talking a lot about how to better utilize your talent and affect your bottom line throughout the conditions that are happening out there. Of course, there'll be a strong focus on operations. It's my background, it's what I do. But the most important part of this entire presentation is hopefully my ability to alter your perspective, to get you to think a little bit differently about your business, about what you believe about your business, and about how to move your business forward. We're going to
Derrick, quick
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Could you share your screen just
Oh
for
my goodness, did it stop sharing? See, that's not good. Let's go back and do that. Let's find
that would be amazing.
what
Sorry.
just
Thank you.
happened. You've got it. Let's see. How about that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let's just start over a little bit here. The best way to predict the future is to design it. We're going to be going through the Vistage decision model and talking about utilizing your talent, affecting your bottom line, a focus on your operations, but again, most importantly, to alter your perspective. There are 10 ideas and tools in this presentation that you can go out and start to use in your business this afternoon, and those will help you in your journey. And first and foremost, some of these ideas and tools, you'll be able to pick up the tools because I'll show you what they are and how to use them. But ideas also can be tools. It's a different way of framing the way that you think. Now, my presentation style is a little bit different. If you've seen me present before, you know it's a bit of a mosaic. I'm going to throw a lot of different things at you, ideas, concepts, stories, suggestions, and then we'll work together towards the end of this presentation to bring all those things together into a cohesive plan that you can use inside your business. One thing I will note is I do speak quickly. I was born in the Northeast. I have worked on this for many years in trying to slow down. But the best suggestion I have for you is after this is over, watch that webinar video at 0.7 speed, and it will sound just like a normal person is communicating with you. That means that in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to give you about 3 hours of content so you can go back and extract that out later. So let's get started in talking about uncertainty. Now, in our business, as in our life, there are only two things that we can affect every single day. We can affect our energy. We can boost that with caffeine, with working out, with lots of different things, or our approach. Our approach is infinite. And if we change our approach, it opens up all sorts of opportunities to us. Today, I'm talking to you about how to redesign your approach for the uncertainty we're finding in the markets today. And to do that, I want to go back in history. Anybody that knows my presentation style knows I always tell stories from history. And today, I'm going to tell you the story of a guy named Charles Darwin. Now, you probably are familiar with him. 1859, he writes The Origin of Species, and it revolutionizes and transforms the scientific, the theological, and philosophical industries. But it does even more than that. It becomes a basis for the way that we think about business. Survival of the fittest. This becomes this mantra of business and capitalism. For the last 150 years, Charles Darwin discovers evolution. He uncovers this, and it becomes summarized as the survival of the fittest. Except Charles Darwin is not the one that made famous the survival of the fittest. It was actually a guy named Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was like the Tony Robbins of his day. He went around and he did lectures, and a lot of people that had money came and listened to the words of Herbert Spencer. And Herbert Spencer reads The Origin of Species, and he stands up in front of his audiences and his crowds, and he says, "Let me tell you what all this means. In the end, it just means survival of the fittest. The strong will survive and the weak will be eliminated." And this becomes the basis of capitalistic thinking starting in the 1860s all across the world. And Charles Darwin, but the guy who we give credit for that idea, he actually said this: communities that included the greatest number of sympathetic members are the ones that flourish best and do best out there. In relation to the survival of the fittest, he did mention it in this context. It's highly improbable that the number of people that have bravery and sympathy could actually evolve through a system of survival of the fittest. And Herbert Spencer went out all across the world and he taught this message of survival of the fittest. He was out there. If you had Vistage groups back then, I'm sure he would have been a very well-known speaker. He was traveling around the country doing these things all over the world. And Charles Darwin went and saw him give this speech that talked about survival of the fittest. And at the end of it, he gave a number of reports to reporters, and we took those and summarized those through ChatGPT. And here's what he said. Spencer argues so confidently, one could easily forget he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. This core concept that we all adopted, Charles Darwin was the one who said, it's just completely and totally untrue. What actually does work is cooperation and collaboration. It's why you're in Vistage. You get together every single month and you sit around the table and you talk about these things and you welcome each other and you integrate ideas and you work these things together. That's what gives us the strength that we have. And there's two different types of evolution when we really think about it. There's phyletic gradualization, and this is the gradual heretic improvements over time to modify things. That's how we get here to this day, continuous growth and development as it occurs over time. That's the gradual approach. But there's another aspect to evolution, punctuated equilibrium. That's when things suddenly occur, when there's a comet that falls out of the sky, when there's a volcano that erupts, when somebody sends a tweet and all of a sudden everything is different than it was the day before. And it's not just Twitter, it's tariffs, it's global unrest, it's AI, it's the judicial system, it's drones. There is a tremendous amount of punctuated equilibrium that is occurring right now. And interestingly, from a scientific perspective, when punctuated equilibrium occurs, who goes extinct? Yeah, the fittest, the ones that are most that are the top of the food chain, the polar bears, the leopards, the saber-toothed tiger, the gorillas, they're the ones that go extinct. The fittest do not have an evolutionary advantage when punctuated equilibrium comes. So this concept of survival of the fittest, we think it's about competition, but it's not. The fittest are those who collaborate and cooperate with their organizations. A great example is the tiger. The fact that we have tigers on this planet today all goes back to about 30 years ago, because the biggest company in the world for much of the 20th century was ExxonMobil, Esso as they're known globally. And their logo, their motto, everything about that brand was the tiger. Put a tiger in your tank. This is the model of ExxonMobil. And then because of changes in climate and changes in the things that were happening around the world starting in the 1990s, we started to realize the tigers were going extinct. And somebody over there at ExxonMobil looked around and said, that would be a real bad black eye for our organization if the motto of our strength and power was to just be eliminated on this planet. So ExxonMobil nearly single-handedly saved the tiger by funding 336 grants to save tigers in the wild, while simultaneously changing their branding to eliminate the tiger from anything that they used into the future. There's punctuated equilibrium out on the horizon. So this idea of constant perpetual growth at all costs is not an evolutionary advantage. Evolution shows it's not. All of our history shows us it's not. And yet, how does this relate to business? Well, we've all probably heard this statistic. You'll find it in magazines and news reports all over the time that 70% of US businesses go under every 5 years. Now, that's actually not true. It's only 48% of businesses go under every 5 years here in the United States. And oddly enough, those companies that focus on systemization, that slow their growth in order to organize and standardize their operations, they only fail 15% of the time. Now that 70% number, where the heck does that come from? Oh, it's actually really 67%, and it only applies to one category of companies. Those that have achieved the Inc. 5000 status of being the fastest growing company in the United States. Those companies have a 67% probability of going out of business in the next 5 years. That thing we all try to attain is actually one of the foremost indicators of if you will go out of business. That's something that we have to consider in our strategy. We have to be able to pivot and become less reliant on the strategy that we use today and more reliant on the systems and improving the process. We have to make organizations that don't just thrive when the market grows, but can actually succeed when there's change and there's punctuated equilibrium as well. Now, we all probably remember 2020, and some of us are here old enough to remember what happened in 2008. And there's many incredible lessons we can learn about what happens when things suddenly change. One of my favorite quotes right now is this: you can't control the wind, but you can control the sails. And that's what we have to focus on. I can't focus on the wind. I have to focus on the position of my organization in that wind and direct it. By the way, that quote is from the famed American philosopher Jimmy Dean, the Sausage King. So it shows you that these things come from anywhere. So we've talked about how our idea about the survival of the fittest maybe has been morphed by history. And maybe we should also check some of our other beliefs about what we believe about how we build and grow our businesses. Now, there's two different types of management theory in America, and many people don't know this, but McGregor talked about this in the 1960s. There's two different philosophies on how to manage people in the United States. One has become the dominant force, the X theory of management, and the Y theory of management has taken a back seat. Here's what the X theory of management says. People dislike work, so you have to motivate them with carrots and sticks to get them to do things. People need to have their behaviors controlled. We've got to get control over them, and revenue growth is the only goal. The Y theory of management says work is natural and people actually want to do it if it's been designed correctly, and that we need to give people the ability to speak up whenever they have no fear, so they can stand up to management and say, I don't think this makes sense. We know more about the situations that are happening than you. And in the Y theory of management, cooperation is the strategic fittest advantage. Now, these ideas, the first set of ideas, this X theory comes from only 4 people. It comes from Welsh, it comes from Drucker, and it comes from 2 that you've probably not heard of, Jensen and Mecklin. They pretty much determined how Wall Street runs and how quarterly earnings and all these kind of things with the theory of the firm, what they wrote in the 1970s. According to ChatGPT, 90% of all of the information in your brain that tells you how to run a business comes from these 4 gentlemen. Anybody want to guess how many of them actually worked in business? 1. 3 of them were academics and professors. Only 1 of these men actually ever managed a single person in their life. Yet all of our beliefs are based upon what these four men believed. And the only one that ever actually ran a business, GE, Jack Welch, the Titan, Neutron Jack. What was he famous for? For his neutron. That's why they called him. He was very good at imploding entire organizations and removing them around and taking the people out of them. And listen, after he took his $500 million bonus at retirement, GE became almost no more. They had to be bailed out by the federal government and their parts were sold out all around the world. The only remnant of GE is still out there and it still touches you every single day. This is something I'm sure Jack Welch might not be very proud of, but the only remnant left is Genpact. Anybody know what Genpact does? It's the largest telemarketing and text marketing and customer service firm in the world. Every bad experience you have with customer service, the 53 spam messages I get on my phone today, thank you, Jack Welch. This is your contribution to the American economy. So maybe the X theory of management needs to be reconsidered. The Y theory of management came out early in the 20th century here in the United States when things weren't real good. We had a 10-year depression, we had a drought, we had famine. Things were rough in the United States. And stacking on top of that, we had to deal with the Volkswagens of Germany. By the way, this is the Volkswagen logo from 1939. I don't know if anybody sees any vague familiarities there with anything else in American history, but the world was in turmoil during that time. And as World War II breaks out, these factories, they're not run by the people who had been there before. 1/3 of the American workforce got drafted and pulled into the war, and 200,000 of the best middle managers in America were commissioned by the federal government to go off and run logistics for the troops. I cannot even imagine for one moment what it was like in the 1940s inside those factories where the only people left to work were those too old, too sick, or too fat, or too weak to go to war. 8 million women that joined the workforce to replace those 17 million men that left. And on top of that, FDR allowed children of the age of 12 to enter into the workforce at that moment in time because we needed the help. This would have been a very difficult bunch to manage while you're in the middle of everything that's going on around this world. I just want to note, if any of you were old enough to remember, maybe 1942 Vistage meeting, May, it's like, anybody have anything you want to work on? Yeah, 1/3 of my employees are gone. All of my management's gone. The federal government's saying we've got to double and triple our capacity. This was a rough time in American history, but there were other ideas that came out of that time. Men like Henry Kaiser and W. Edwards Deming and the folks at the Hawthorne Works, they began to develop a different set of management principles in the 1930s that were completely and totally different from that X management style that we use to this day. And in that, they believed that leadership meant only one thing: you go first. If you want your people to tell you about problems they're having at work and how to improve things, you go first. If you want your people to start out and launch out into a new direction, you go first. Leadership is nothing more than you getting in the saddle and leading them out to do what they wanted to do. And these men discovered incredible techniques. If you watch any of my other webinars with Vistage, 98% faster Kaiser's people were than union workers at that time. They did work 98% faster. It's just shocking what happened during that moment in history where we focused on the system and the people that worked in the system, and we optimized the two in conjunction with each other. And this causes the greatest boom in American history. We win World War II, and in 1939, when we're just crawling out of the Great Depression, 5 years later, we're the biggest, baddest ass thing anybody's ever seen on the planet. We control the military, industrial, we control industry, we control economy all around the world by using a different way of thinking. And remember, what did Darwin say? It's all about cooperation and sympathy in the end. The fittest isn't the one that's the strongest and grows the fastest. It's the ones that work together. But unfortunately, here in the United States, by 1954, as the war is wrapping up, and America has embraced this idea of collaboration and cooperation and working together, that idea starts to wane here in the United States because we have a new enemy. We've defeated the Nazis overseas, and now we got a new enemy, and that's the communists. And all of these ideas of empowering employees and working together and collaborating as a team, those things started to sound a whole lot like what the Soviet Union was saying and the Marxist philosophy of work, that people control the means of production through cooperation and self-management. And those ideas in the United States begin to take a back seat starting in the early 1950s because men are coming back from war. How are they used to being managed in war? They're told what to do and they do it. Blind obedience to authority. And this philosophy comes back from World War II and it gets embedded right here inside what you and I believe about our business. Now, here's the funniest part about this story. When Americans go over to Japan to help them rebuild their economy, they only knew the why theory of management. They only knew collaboration and cooperation and support and stabilizing and working together was going to be the solution. So what did they do? MacArthur banned companies, 325 companies in Japan that were focused on shareholder value, centralized control, and expansion via competitive growth and acquisition. They wanted to break up the 325 companies, sell it off, and give the money to the public good. They banned the method of management that we use to this day, and instead they replaced it with a method of management called Karatsu: collaboration, connection, support, and stabilization. You can see how the roles reversed almost overnight in 1954. The reality is, instead of focusing on financial gain in Japan, they focused on how to get people to really be involved and emotionally connected to the work. And when these ideas switch in 1954 here in the United States, the UAW, our auto working industry, produces 10 cars for every employee in the industry. And the rest of the world is anemic. They can only produce a mere 4 cars per person in their industry. And 23 years later, when X and Y switch, American productivity has increased 0.0% under those ideals. And the Japanese, the average employee there produces 60 cars a year. The average Japanese employee is the equivalent of 6 Americans doing the work, all because they worked together. W. Edwards Deming, who was one of the leaders and fathers of the Why movement here in the United States at the end of the war, said 85% of all of the reasons for problems and failure and deficiencies and rework in your business are the system. It has nothing to do with the employees. Change the system and improve the performance of the entire company. In Japan, they call it poke-yoke, to make something idiot-proof. Make it so easy that anybody can do it. And when the work becomes easy, the work becomes cheap and it becomes easy to do. And all of those bottlenecks fall aside and you have more time to focus on designing the business for what you want it to be. And the American ideal established in 1954 here in the United States is the same idea that we use to this day. We define organizational goals, we turn those into objectives, we track that progress, we measure performance, and we give rewards and consequences. The thing that we banned in Japan, because we knew it didn't work, is a method that we still currently use to this day. Now, I'm not knocking Drucker and Welsh and all these guys. I read all their books just like everybody else. All I'm saying is we have to understand our history if we truly want to move our organizations forward, particularly in times of uncertainty. Why not look at the ideals that worked when times were uncertain and apply those back into your business? Now, listen, every other speaker, every other author, every podcaster, everybody you hear at a conference, they all tell you the same things. And that is that you in management should modify people's actions and behaviors. Interestingly enough, though, that's the 4th step in psychologically making change among people. And it's very close to the end. The truth of the matter is, if you have children, go tell them how to behave and then text me and let me know how it worked, because it doesn't. If you really think that changing people's actions and behaviors work, write out a list of all the things you expect from your spouse, what they'll wear and time they'll get out of bed and when they'll have food on the table, and see how that works. Human beings don't like to be told how to act and behave. If you have any children within proximity of you, you know what I'm talking about. Instead, how do you modify somebody's actions and behaviors? Not by telling them what to do, but by changing the way that they think, by changing their vocabulary. That comes from their perceptions and attitudes, and that comes from their values and beliefs. That's why I've just spent the last 20 minutes telling you that some of your values and beliefs about how you run business in a growth mindset has to shift and change when uncertainties on the horizon. So let's launch into these ideas. The why theory. There's only two rules in the why theory of management. And both of them are so simple that it blows people away. We call this the log and the snail. What's the snail? Management inside the why theory, what the Japanese used to become a dominant force in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, what made America great in the first place was log and snail. Every single day, every manager has only two jobs. Number one, go find the slowest part in a process and optimize it. Make it go faster. Once you have done that, go find the next slowest step in the process and make it go faster. Once you have done that, go find the next slowest step. Simply put, go out and find the things that are slow and improve them. Why? Because you can't go faster than the slowest step in your process. You must optimize your process to get more out of it. If you want to get more throughput for it, if you want more work done with less people, there's only one way, and that is to find the slowest step and optimize it. The second part of that theory is that while you are on your journey of improving the slowness, you look at every single person you walk past, every person at the front line, everybody that's in a truck, you talk to the janitor, you talk to every single one of them, and you say, what stands in your way? What slows you down? In your day, what takes the most amount of time? If there was one thing around here that we could improve upon, what would it be? And guess what? That's the entire management philosophy. This is what improved Japanese productivity by 1,500% while American productivity remained the same. Talk to people and ask them how to get more work done, and they tell you. It's really fascinating. We used to call this in America, when it was popular, management by wandering around. What's manager's responsibility? Not to sit at desks. And management's responsibility is to wander around amongst the work and look for things that could be improved. Look for people that are struggling and not blame the people, but say, what about the process makes you struggle? And then improving those things. In Japan, they call it the gemba. Go and see. Never, ever, ever trust what you as an executive team believe. Instead, go out and talk to the people who actually are there when the data is collected. And listen, your people aren't going to do this. They're not just going to go out and start optimizing things on their own, because leadership is only summed up in one thing. You got to go first. You have to be the one that initiates the conversation. You can't just rely upon them. It's all about cooperation, collaboration, and working together. Now, I think I've made that point for the last 20 minutes. So let's talk about this. The other thing that we have to understand with our business is sometimes we can move our business forward without moving it up and to the right. See, because there are times when things grow and there are times naturally where things don't. I got to work on leaning out a little bit. I've been growing a little bit too much. Right? There are times when we need to pull aside and we need to focus on other things. That isn't failure. That's forward. And that's the direction we need to be thinking about moving our organizations. We have to have plans, written plans that tell us what to do when things don't go well. Now, I was very fortunate in the early 2000s to have three mentors that were very well known. These were the guys that would get called in front of Congress in the 1970s and 80s about business things. And they showed me a lot of different techniques, and one in particular that everybody knew back in the 70s and 80s. Everybody knew that the market doesn't always go up. Sometimes it goes down. Sometimes there's uncertainty. And every single company has to have a 5-10-20 plan. Now, you might not even be familiar with a 5-10-20 plan, which is shocking to me because it was a core part of American management for a very, very long time. That's a manila envelope that sits inside your top desk drawer, and it has 3 different plans inside of it. One of them is how we reduce our costs by 5% in 1 week from today. One of them is how we reduce our costs by 10% 1 month from today. And the third one is how will we reduce our costs by 20% by the end of this quarter, within 1 quarter. And this plan is created not during moments of chaos. It's created before the chaos ensues so that you've got a logically well-written plan by you and your managers on the exact steps that you need to take. As soon as you see any sort of volatility in the market, you just pull your plan out and you go, is this a 5, 10, 20 event? And you determine which one it is. And then you just proceed forward. And you've got your fortress. You now know that if you start to lose on the battlefield, you've got a place to retreat to. You've got a fortress that you can bring things inside of. Now, let me show you what these plans consist of. The end of the week plan is pretty simple. What are we pausing, halting, and freezing? What do we just stop doing? We're not going to overreact here. Just don't sign the contract right now. Let's just hold off. Let's see. Let's try to negotiate a little more. Let's pause this discretionary spending. Let's look at low ROI stuff and just pull it. Put it on the side. Any of the risky stuff, let's put on the side now. By the end of the month, we have to consolidate roles. We have to look at maybe moving fractional consultants in or contractors in to do roles that we maybe have open. We need to delay our major investments in expansion. Let's start to renegotiate contracts. Let's look at our project timelines. Let's make little adjustments. Tiny little things that we planned ahead of time to work on. End of the quarter, that's more robust. But one thing is critically important with this. My mentors all taught me that at that end of the quarter, the 20% plan, yes, you need to be thinking about a reduction in force, but you should also be thinking about business unit restructuring, pricing. We just talked about that. Pricing is not, all it takes, if pricing is your core strategy, all it takes is somebody to not raise prices and you go out of business. That's just simple. If you have 5 vendors and all of them raise prices by 20% and one says, now we're going to hold fast, where does all the business go? It goes to them. Anybody that lived in middle America when big box retailers moved in the 80s and 90s, you saw what happened. All the business owners like us, all the corner stores and the laundry, all that stuff went away, right? It got eliminated in that process. Those who focus on pricing, that's a good way to get eliminated. You might have to do it, but find other ways as well. If you're the only one in your town that doesn't raise prices, what's going to happen to your business? You're going to grow. So you've got to figure out how to optimize your costs. So maybe you can afford to do it without the same price increase of everybody else. Now, I put this little asterisk here beside the reduction in force planning, because if things are starting to slow down and finally my race car that's been growing is about ready to come into the pit stop and we're going to make improvements to this thing, do I really want the guy that puts the wheels on not to be available? No, I want to keep the crew. I got to keep that crew because I'm about ready to pull in for a pit stop. Things are actually going to slow momentarily, and that's going to give me an opportunity to change the oil and the tires and to upgrade things and do all sorts of investments. So when that checkered flag waves again, I get to shoot out in the front of the pack while everybody else is anemic, stuck in their pit stop. We can't afford to do that. We've got to focus on improving the situation. We have to help our own organizations to not go extinct. We've got to pivot and move to a different strategy. Now, when I was the COO and president of Fat Scooters here in Arizona, we lived through 2020 like many of you did, and it was terrifying. I mean, I remember those second 2 weeks of March. It was crazy. We weren't sure what to do. And I will admit that I pulled out my 5, 10, 20 plan and we went right for 20. We started making the changes. And that meant that we had to plan for a reduction in force. But I didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. And I knew that if I cut too many people, I would be anemic and I wouldn't be able to capitalize on that opportunity. So what did we do? We looked at work differently. Everybody was used to working a 40-hour work week. We worked the 40-hour work week because Henry Ford created that in the 1920s. But we went to our people and we said, you want to sell us your time back? You want every Friday off? You want to work a 30-hour week? What would you like? Do you want to take some time? Anybody here wanted to travel the world and take a vacation? Want to take a month off? We went to our people and we told them we needed to make a 20% reduction in our overall labor costs. And when we let them decide how to do that, and now in this instance, they decided they didn't want to be open on Fridays anymore. That immediately meant we had a 32-hour work week. We were able to reduce salaries accordingly, but I had others that said, hey, I really need the money. I've got a family to feed. Okay, but Joe over here, he actually wants to take 2 months off to work on a remodeling addition to his house. So we just balanced it out. We knew what the pull had to be, and we let everybody make their own choices. And then when it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, we went back to people and said, hey, can you come back more? But we let them be in control of that equation. Now, my attorney requires me here to put a long legal disclosure on the screen that says, do not trust me. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Contact your lawyer if you get to this point and ask them, how do we figure it out? How do we keep people's benefits? What is a full-time definition according to our plan? Figure all those things out. But you might be surprised how many people are willing to raise their hand and say, hey, you know what? I like to DoorDash with my daughter. Is it cool if I just took every Friday off and DoorDashed with her? She'd love it. We'd have a blast together. Let them make some decisions. We've got to shift because we're in this mode now where things are uncertain. That growth mindset is still every one of us every day. Every CEO I've talked to in the last 6 weeks, always, how am I going to grow in this? How do we grow? Where are we going to find more sales? What do we have to do? All of these things. Maybe we have to start shifting from that growth mindset because we're in the moment of punctuated equilibrium. And that growth mindset in moments of punctuated equilibrium always equates to only one thing, and that's death. So we've got to focus on a systems mindset. The macro I cannot control. Oh, but I can control the micro. I can control what happens inside my organization. That means we have to shift our pattern from thinking just offensively to also start to defend as well. Think in the defensive position. This won't last forever. We know that. It's only going to be a certain period of time. Let's wait till it stabilizes. Let's defend our position. Let's make sure that we are pulling our organization in for a pit stop and changing the tires and the oil and the filters and get ready for the other side where everybody else is still stuck. So we've got to start thinking systematically. We have to understand the order of operations, the size, the variation, the distance between things, how they all work together in conjunction. As W. Edwards Deming said, in times like this, in God we trust, everybody else shows up with data. We don't trust anybody's opinions anymore. It's time to really look at the data. And I'm not talking about a dashboard. If you think dashboards will save your business, I encourage you to try to drive home from work today using only your dashboard. Wait till everybody else leaves because you're going to wreck. The truth of the matter is, a dashboard tells us what has happened. It doesn't give us any vision into where the organization is going. Because we have lost the ability, because of dashboards, we no longer are observing information at its source. We don't know the variation. We don't understand the conditions. All we see is the average rolled up. Well, what if the average is 10, but one day it's 75 and the next days it's 5? What did we do on the day where it was 75? What if we could duplicate those results? So we've got to get down into the data, not in the spreadsheet, but where the data is created. All of the data in your organization is created someplace. The origin conditions of that data are far more important than the actual roll-up of the data itself. We got to end the hunch. We've got to stop having hunches in our business. We have to get very, very focused on deliberately designing the process to produce what it is we need. We are the designer. The business is the clay. We are the only ones with the hands to form that. We've got to do it, and we have to talk to our people and move them from the position that we have in our Y form of management, soldier-based, defend the position of management, and we have to shift them into a scout position. What's the difference between a soldier and a scout? The soldiers just wait there and waiting for commands. A scout comes back to the camp and sits down with the general and says, y'all are missing something. Something's going on over here, and we need to take care of it very quickly. Move your people from soldiers to scouts. In biology, this is called the concept of the sensor and the doer. Every living organism has sensors and it has doers. I have them, my eyes, my ears, my mouth, and I have the doers right here. I go and do things based upon what the sensor tells me. In biology, that's what's called the mind. It's not the brain. The connection between the sensor and the doer is the mind. That's how we instinctually navigate and move, and how we know where there's things to avoid, and how we find our next opportunities. And in most of our businesses, the sensor and the doer are totally separate functions. They don't even talk to each other. We have all of these different layers in between to try to get the information from what's actually happening. And every time there's a diffusion every time some information is lost. So we can't do that. We have to improve the lines of communication throughout the entire organization. The reality is we live right now in volatility. But volatility doesn't push people out. It's silence and vagueness that does. McKinsey did a 2023 study, and they found that those who trust in leadership are 2.5 times more likely to stay, and those who don't, and where management is poorly communicating, 3 times higher attrition. Now, listen, I know that we sit inside of our Vistage meetings and we talk about these things and we wring our hands and we say, what are we going to do? But if we're not asking our people those same exact things, they are lost. And they are looking for another job because they're concerned that you might not be around. Engage them in the systems mindset. Here's an incredible tool that you can start to use right now. I used this when I worked in private equity. My mentors all told me that this was the most important measurement of any business. And of the last 70 Vistage workshops I've done, I've asked this question of every executive in those. And so far, only 5 have been able to give me the answer to this. What is your cash conversion cycle? From the day a lead comes into your CRM, how many days till you send the first invoice and how many days till you send the last invoice? What is that number? What is the average? I'm not talking about, well, it depends there. Okay, it does, it depends. What about this class of customer? What about this class of customer? What about this product? Find out that number, and is that number getting longer or shorter? Because if it's getting longer, you better get yourself some lines of credit and reach out to a bankruptcy attorney because they'll be able to assist you in the future. You've got to make sure that that cash conversion cycle stays very, very healthy. This was the only measurement my leaders in private equity wanted me to go out and find inside organizations. And then they wanted to know the trend. Well, what was it last month? What was it last quarter? What was it a year ago? What was it 3 years ago? Is it improving? Is it declining? If we put $100 into this company, how fast till they send an invoice because of it? Critically important. Go and find this number out today in your business. How long does it take from the time somebody comes in the CRM until you send them an invoice? What was it last year? See the direction it's going and start to act immediately upon that. The reality is, here's the way to best summarize this. If your business was an hourglass, how long would it take? How long does it take for things to flow through the organization? Because that is a very good indication of your health and the fitness of your company. Now, we can all talk about numbers, but if we don't understand the quincux, how the basics of statistics work and how it always goes in a bell curve, the vast majority of things fall in the middle, and there's all of these things on the outside. And how do we affect these events to push that average up? That's the basics of financial management, statistical control of the organization. Next up, we can't fix what we can't see. So it's important that we get out in front of it. If you've ever driven a stick shift, you know how this works. So many of us, we're in first gear and we don't want to let off on the gas and engage that clutch, letting off on the gas and temporary slowing down so we can push it into second gear. And then when that clutch engages again, anybody here that's ever driven a stick shift, you know that feeling, right? Where all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got a whole new gear to explore. It's way easier. There's less friction. There's less heat. But now all of a sudden I can go faster. I can do more things because of that. And here's the truth. The only way to do that, the only way to shift your organization from one gear into the other, number one, you have to let off on the gas temporarily. The market's doing that for us. Thank you, market, for providing us the first step. And the next step is you can't fix what you can't see. You've got to go out, get away from your documents, get away from your financials, get a bunch of sticky notes, get up against the wall, start putting it all together like a detective thing and figuring this thing out. So this is the next serious tool I want to teach you. And I've got to tell you a quick story about it before we start. In the 1960s, a guy named George Land was working with NASA. He was a consultant and he was responsible because we were in the space race and it was a very volatile time. The Russians are beating us. All of these things are happening. He was asked to go out and create a survey that would allow NASA to find out who are creative geniuses. Who's a creative genius? So he did. He went out and he created a survey. They gave it to 280,000 American adults, and they discovered that 2% of the American population are creative geniuses that would qualify to work in an organization like NASA. And then Mr. Land, he got another job right after that. Yeah, he got a job at the preschool system, Head Start, here in the United States. And this guy decided to take the same exact survey that we use to find the smartest and brightest adults and to give that survey to children. And what do you think happens? For those under the age of 5 years old, 98% of them qualified as a NASA creative genius. 98% of kids under the age of 5 qualified to go work at NASA. But by the time they were 10, it had fallen just 30%. By the time they reached 16, it had fallen to 12%. By the time they reached adulthood, only 2% of the population would qualify. What happened between those 5 and 18? I'll let you decide what happens in that time. The reality is, how do we learn about the world? How do we get things to work? Well, we do it by drawing things out. Put a kid in a sand box this weekend with a stick and see what happens. They draw circles and lines. This is what we do. Take your baby and put him at the table with a bunch of crayons, and what are they going to do? They're going to draw circles and lines. They just draw this out. And we all think it's funny. Oh yeah, he's just drawing, he's doing. No. Psychologists now will be able to look at this and understand these children are making diagrams in their head. This one, when they start getting old enough to speak, what do you say? Well, what's that? Oh, that's Puppy. This is Grammy. They literally start doing these things. We don't know. They could be solving quantum positions for us. We just can't interpret what it says. So we know that human brains, without the use of language, can really understand and form the world this way. Just like detectives do in every one of your favorite detective shows. They don't just sit around and talk about this stuff in a boardroom. They put stuff up on the wall and they start working through it. And this is the technique I'm going to teach you. This is a fascinating technique that was created over 30 years ago. It's been used tens of thousands of times, and it is problem solving 101. The first thing you got to do is got to create a map. Map out the actions and results of your business. Grab a handful of sticky notes and a marker, stand up against a wall, start putting it together. This is planning, right? This is how we do this. Lines on our maps represent work. That's the action. Circles represent completed segments of work. That's the result. Action, result. Actions, lead received, meeting scheduled, needs assessed, proposal created. Very, very simple. This is the lowest fidelity version of a map you can possibly create. And every one of those circles, it just has a noun and a past tense verb in it. Order created, order received. And you start popping those things up in order. And then all you've got to do from that point is just start asking some questions. And you will be shocked and amazed at what you find. You're going to put those past tense verbs up there, which means all this is just a picture of history. That's what we're looking at now. We're looking at the history of how work gets done. And then you go first. Start asking questions. Why does this happen this way? What happens here? What software do we use? Is there anything that stands in your way? Could we eliminate this step? Do we really need to do this? Many of you have seen my Vistage presentation, and I've got your text messages. The one the other week, 32 hours a week his people were spending on sending him a report that he never asked for. That's a full-time $75,000 a year to create a report that he doesn't ask for and doesn't look at. That's what I'm talking about. Map these things out. Bring the people that do the work together in that. I don't care if you got to use strings and markers and pieces of paper. Use whatever you need, but start mapping it out, because maps are very limbic to us. Look at the way we communicated as a species in our origins. It's up against a wall, pointing at stuff with dad saying the mammoth comes this way and you kids get downhill and here's what we're going to do. This is what we're talking about. Empower them. And once you do that, oh man, you can do all sorts of stuff. What's the bottleneck? Where's the handoff points? Where are we delayed? What can we consolidate? Where's there variation? Do we have a best practice? What system to use? Is this the most cost effective? Where do we have duplicate approvals? Do we really need to have all these meetings around here? Could we just use Slack or Zoom or something else? What tasks are done out of habit? What could we pause? All of these things can happen. And all of those things are exactly what those franchises do to get down to that 15%. That's all I'm asking you to do. Just do what franchises do and reduce your risk and increase your certainty. Push your certainty through the roof. If you're old enough to remember, 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. I see Ann singing it along with me there. That's a process map, people. That's all that is. Every single person that's ever assembled a hamburger at McDonald's knows 2 all beef patty special sauce. That's what I'm talking about. Normalize that business. Obtain certainty by adjusting the sales. Final main piece here is this. We've got to be the designers of our business, because our people don't do what they want to do at work. They only do what we allow them to do, what they are capable. We're the ones that set the rules and the requirements and all. Why don't my people do better? Because you don't allow them to do better. Well, they've got all the, do they have all the tools? You've gone and spoken with each one of them. They have all the tools. Well, no, I haven't done that. Okay, well then get out there and do that. Now there's a famous man that you probably all know of, Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates went first. And how did he do that? Well, he understood that at that time in the 1970s, everybody wanted to use a computer, but to use a computer, you had to learn how to use a computer, right? You had to learn, you had manuals, and we all had these 3-ring binders, what exe function, all of these kind of things. And Bill Gates just said, you know what? I'm just going to do something totally different. I'm just going to teach computers about humans. Don't teach humans about computers, teach computers about humans. And he created the personal computer and he launched Windows and it changed the entire freaking world. And later on, after all this, people said to him, how did you think of this idea? It's the complete opposite of what everybody else was doing. And he said, the key to success is really simple. Yeah, you just hire lazy people. What? Because think about it, lazy people always find a way to do things the most easily. They will lay awake at night trying to think about how to avoid work. And isn't that the best possible thing for your business? If everybody in your organization every day walked in and say, how can we still get everything done around here with as little of work as it possibly takes? Wouldn't that be a massive strategic advantage? Yet you hire the exact opposite. He's focusing on hiring the laziest people he can find. You're trying to find all the hustlers that won't even question and will just get her done. That's not a strategy, friends. Lazy people unite. We've got a place here in this marketplace, but we have to go first. We have to lead with that behavior because people don't do what they want to do. They only do what they can. And you're the designer of your business. Nobody else. Your employees don't design it. You're in charge of the design. Now, I know what some of you are saying right now. You're like, Derrick, everything you've just talked about, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things and you're very passionate about this, but this isn't leadership. This is leadership. All of these things are so simple and so easy. I mean, come on, really? Well, then why don't you do them? If this is all the most basic, simple, easy things to do to optimize your organization and to survive in uncertainty, why haven't you taken those actions yet? So let this be a reminder that we don't have to always be in growth mode. There is a better way, a systems way, and let's do that through conscious co-creation. Working with the people inside the organization. Look, a lot of us are terrified right now about what's going on. You know who's as terrified as we are? Our people. So what if we got together and we got out the sticky notes and we started designing it together and we started finding ways not only to improve our organization, but to make sure those people will have a job and be there. People will get excited about this when they know that they can help control their own destiny. You can only obtain certainty by design. So in closing, stay flexible. You've got to be open to change and adaptable. Change your approach, not your energy. Change the way you approach the problem. If you don't have a 5, 10, 20 plan in your top dress drawer right now, I know what you're working on this weekend because you better get one of those things and you better get it really, really fast. Focus on what you can control. You can't dictate the wind, but you're the one that controls the sails. You must respond to these circumstances. Keep moving your organization forward. Maybe you've got to give up the up and to the right trajectory for 3 months. Maybe you've got to say, you know what? Let's focus on optimizing this thing. Let's not kill ourselves trying to raise prices and then drop them the next day and then send a memo apologizing for raising the prices. And then the next day we have to raise the price even more before we drop. Let's just not do that. Let's just let it stabilize a little bit. Get sticky nose out, map the process, find out how long it takes for things to happen inside. And finally, you go first. Now, last minute, how do you do this? How do you get started on this today? Well, you grab a bunch of sticky notes and you write 3 things on the wall. Start, stop, and continue. And then you go out to your people and you say, what are the things we need to start doing around here? What are the things we should stop doing around here that are really just a waste of time and money, like 32 hours a week to send me a report I don't look at? And what are the things that we need to continue doing? What are the experiments that we need to do more of? Put all those up on the wall. And if you're not sure how to prioritize them, just give everybody in your company 5 little red dots, little sticky stickers, and let them go up and place them on the things. Let them have 5 votes. Well, I'm gonna put 3 here and 2 over here. I'm gonna put 5 on 5. Let them do that. They'll give you a heat map of exactly where to go and to start and to find all the things that you can optimize and improve upon. That's all you've got to do. Start, stop, and continue. In the end, leadership comes from you leading, from you actually stepping out first. That is my time. Make sure you check out my new book, The System. Get a copy for yourself, for teams. If you're having a wedding, these are incredible wedding gifts and anniversary. Your spouse would love this as an anniversary. No, they would not. Don't do that, people. Go buy them a toaster or something else. Thank you all so much. You can find lots of my Vistage resources on our website as well via the QR code. Back to you, Ann.
Thank you so much, Derrick. So many things. And I want to try and get to some of the great questions that we had come in. Now, you talked about the fact that dashboards are more historical.
Hmm.
Many of us have heard ITR economics talk about their rates of change, 1 over 12, 3 over 12, 12 over 12, and mapping that to the future
Yes.
versus what happened. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that dashboard is only right now, right? We've got to look up over that dashboard and take that new information and then combine it with what's on that dashboard and say, what is the future? Where are we going? Throwing the turn signal on is a requirement sometimes throughout this. So I follow what I talk the 2030 thing.
Mhm.
We all know what's coming, right? If this isn't coming right now, listen, if certainty is obtained tomorrow and tariffs go to zero and everything is hunky dory and we'll have world peace, we still have to deal with the fact that the economic decisions that were made 10, 15, 20 years ago are coming to roost in 2030, and there's nothing we can do about it. And the only businesses that will survive are those that can do these strategies.
Excellent. Another question we had from David Kern. Much of Deming's approach was focused on manufacturing, and the car is a great example. How does this translate to the service or information economy that we live in today?
Yeah, this is such a great question. And listen, you're right. I mean, he was very big in the manufacturing industry. Um, but the truth is, those lessons all apply elsewhere as well. Organizations that use Deming's philosophy in Japan did this in accounting, they did it in finance, they did it in HR, they did it everywhere. They tracked the process, they looked at everything as because in the end of the day, we all take inputs and we transform those into outputs through a process of throughput. We all are running an assembly line. We're just moving files or emails or
Mhm.
whatever that is down the line. And I think what you'll see is when the Japanese really began to adopt this in the 60s and 70s, call centers used it, receptionists used it, janitorial staff used it. They used those same things to build that back up. And listen, we see that in our work. Manufacturing is not even in our top three of all the organizations that we work with. So we tend to see healthcare services, insurance, doctors' offices. Those are the kind of things that we tend to see. So it does apply really a very broad strokes, but you have to take those lessons and modify them for your business.
Excellent. And I love the idea of the circles and lines and mapping that. And we've heard from some of the experts in AI, like pick the lowest hanging fruit to use AI and where are the biggest friction points. You've used your log and snail approach, like where you could only be as fast as your slowing process. How are you recommending that small and mid-sized businesses use AI as part of that process of identifying areas of friction?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this because two of my biggest customers are AI development firms that use the method to actually identify what should be optimized. Because we as executives think that there's certain things that we should optimize that maybe makes our dashboard better. But the reality is at the front line of the organization, if there's a task that's taking 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and that can be optimized, that improves the capacity of the organization. It allows you, when somebody leaves, not to have to backfill for that. So AI automation is coming, but there's an old thing about the feces in the fan, right? We want to slow the fan down. We don't want to spread this. We don't want to spread bad information everywhere. We've got to optimize the organization first. If we just bring AI in and tell it to do the crap that we already do faster, that makes a mess. Right. We don't want to do bad
Mhm.
stuff faster. This is why SOPs as well. People always say to me, "Oh, we have great SOPs." And I'm like the terms of service on a website, nobody's ever read it because it doesn't make any sense, right? You have to get down to where the rubber meets the road and find these things.
Mhm.
Find those things, then automate them with AI. Find the things that take the most amount of time and make those your focus. And not the time from you, but the time from the employees. Let's make the work go faster so we get to that final invoice quicker.
Yeah, I think you just answered a question that came in from Jennifer Barrows about don't automate bad processes.
Yeah, we always say automate, outsource, abbreviate, eliminate, but eliminate and abbreviate come first.
Mhm.
I'm not going to automate. Why would I outsource a bunch of junk? Like, why would I automate a bunch of junk? No, fix it first and then go back and automate it.
Yeah, I'm going to sneak in one last
Yeah,
question.
please.
I love your idea of keeping the crew during times of uncertainty. And we do see an increasing proportion of our members who are considering a workforce reduction. Maybe it's just not replacing them. But what is your view on what certain German companies did in reducing hours for all employees? You mentioned, buying back some
Yeah.
time. as an alternative to workforce reduction?
I think it's the only way. I mean, really, I think it's the best. You will be shocked if you go out to your crew right now and say, hey, anybody here willing to take a month off unpaid? There are 5 or 6 people that'll raise their hand and go, yeah, my wife retired 6 months ago. We've been talking about doing a thing in Europe. Wait until I retire. Can I get the tickets? I mean, you would be surprised. I just had a grandbaby born. I want to go spend 2 months with her. You'll be surprised how many people will voluntarily say, I will reduce my time. Or what we found during the pandemic, there was a lot of money to be made on DoorDash, right? There was a lot of money to be made. So a lot of my employees came to me and said, hey man, I can make like an extra 50 bucks a day on DoorDash. You cool if I drop out on Fridays? I'll go DoorDash on Friday, and make it up. So yeah, I think that's the best approach. And listen, if we want to find the optimal way to work, look up what's called the DuPont schedule. In the 1950s, DuPont discovered that people working 5, 10-hour days, 3 weeks in a row, and then having 1 week off per month, that exploded their productivity in their organization by giving everybody 1 week off per month, right? That's still cutting hours a little bit. Just think about how do you divvy it out a little different? 20% doesn't mean 20% of the people. We just have to reduce 20% of the hours. How do we do that together?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you all day long, but unfortunately we're out of time. So thank you so much, Derrick, for sharing your insights. This is fantastic. A lot of people were asking about the recording and the slides. We will be sharing those within 24 hours. So look for that email. For our members, be sure to mark your calendar for 2 member exclusive events coming up. We have Brian Bolio from ITR Economics on July 18th. Sharing their latest forecast on planning for Rise and what you can expect for 2026. And then Seth Godin comes to the Vistage community as our next featured speaker. That event streams on August 22nd. And that's a great conversation you will not want to miss. So you can register for these sessions at vistage.com/webinar. That's vistage.com/webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time and attention today. Be safe and be well.